The Last Shepherd, the death of Pope Francis, and the legacy that will echo through eternity. That morning, Rome looked different. The wind that blew through the narrow streets of the Eternal City brought with it an unnatural silence. The sound of the bells of St. Peter's Basilica, always solemn, echoed with a heavier weight. It was no ordinary morning. It was no ordinary day. It was the end of an era. The world watched in astonishment as the announcement made in a choked voice by the Cardinal Dean of the Holy Church, the man who, for more than a decade, had guided billions of faithful with tenderness, firmness, and faith, was gone. Pope Francis, born Jorge Mario Bergoglio, had left this earth for the arms of the Creator. It was March 13th, 2013. White smoke rose from the Sistine Chapel. The world anxiously awaited the name of the one who would succeed Benedict XVI, when Cardinal Taran appeared on the balcony and announced, "Habemus Papam." Few recognized the name that followed, Jorge Mario Bergoglio, but 3 gestures were enough for the whole world to understand the simplicity of his attire. His humble request, "Before I bless you, I ask you to pray for me." The name he chose, Francis, in honor of the poor man of Assisi. It was a new time, a time of simplicity, of contact with the poor, of a church that went out. During his pontificate, Francis became a symbol of God's mercy. He did not come to condemn, but to welcome. In his gestures, washing the feet of prisoners, embracing the sick, welcoming migrants, we saw the footsteps of Christ himself. The Jubilee of Mercy in 2016 was not just a liturgical event. It was a call to the collective conscience of the Church. The Church must be like a field hospital, he said. Where there is a wound, there must be care. Where there is pain, there must be love. His speeches were not just theological, they were human, they touched the heart. Francis was the first Latin American pope, the son of Italian immigrants in Argentina, and this was reflected throughout his mission. He was not a man of the palace, but a man of the people. He visited slums, prisons, and refugee camps. He wept with victims of war. He sat with leaders of other religions, building bridges where walls once stood. He was called a radical by some and a revolutionary by others. But for him, the gospel was always radical. In the Philippines, he wept with a girl who asked why God allows suffering. In the Congo, he knelt before the pain of a people who seemed forgotten. In Abu Dhabi, he signed a historic document for human fraternity alongside Muslim leaders. He did not speak only to Catholics, he spoke to all of humanity. As the years passed, Francis's voice became more measured, his walk slower, his gaze deeper, but he never lost his strength. "Old age is a blessing, not a disease," he said. "It is time to reap what has been sown." Even amidst physical pain, knee problems, and difficulty walking, he refused to stop. He continued to celebrate, to write, to pray, to meet people. He said he would only stop when God said it was time, and that time came. In the early hours of a silent Sunday, Pope Francis' heart fell silent. He departed as he had lived, in peace. According to reports, it was a peaceful death. At his side, a simple cross, a rosary in his hands, and a lit candle. That morning, St. Peter's Square was filled with silent faithful. There were no words, only tears, not of despair, but of longing and of gratitude. Francis's body was laid to rest in St. Peter's Basilica, where so many saints and martyrs rest. But unlike the ceremonial splendor of other popes, his wake was simple as he wanted. The coffin was made of light wood, without gold ornaments. Above it, the gospel was open. No crown, no throne, just a wooden crucifix and the presence of a world in prayer. For hours, a silent line made its way through the square and the corridors of the basilica. They were simple people. They were young, old, religious, and even atheists, all drawn by the strength of the faith of a man who lived the gospel authentically. There, in that line, a Syrian woman knelt and wept. Beside her, a young African recited the Lord's Prayer. An Argentine bishop held a white handkerchief with the name Bergoglio embroidered on it. Each one carried a story marked by the Pope's life. Heads of state cancelled agendas. The European Parliament observed a minute of silence. In the United States, flags were flown at half-mast. In Japan, Buddhist temples rang their bells in tribute. In India, Muslims prayed in honor of the Pope, who always preached peace between religions. In Brazil, a crowd gathered in Aparecida praying a rosary in unison. In Buenos Aires, his hometown, the bells rang for 7 minutes without stopping. In Jerusalem, a rabbi wrote on social media, "He was not just a pope. He was a pontiff, a bridge builder, and we honor him. We mourn." The death of Pope Francis was not just a Catholic event, it was a universal mourning. For 3 days, churches around the world remained open day and night. Millions attended masses, vigils, and moments of worship. On social media, the hashtag Já Obrigado Francisco reached 400 million mentions in just a few hours. In the Rocinha favela, in Rio de Janeiro, children drew pictures with the phrase, "Pope Francis, our friend from heaven." At an orphanage in Ethiopia, children held a procession with candles and sang, "Christ is risen." A missionary in the Amazon declared, "He gave us the courage to carry on. Now it is our turn to keep the flame burning." The tributes were not limited to words. In various parts of the world, people organized concrete gestures in his memory. Groups of volunteers fed the homeless. Young people visited elderly people living alone in nursing homes. Priests opened confessionals in public squares. It was as if the entire world had understood Francis' message. Christian love is not theoretical. He sees himself in the gesture. And that is how he lived. And that is how he will be remembered. The funeral mass was celebrated outdoors in St. Peter's Square with more than 1 million people present. Representatives of all religions, nations, and cultures were side by side. The gospel proclaimed was the same one he lived. "I was hungry, and you gave me food. I was thirsty, and you gave me drink." Mud 25:35. During the homily, the Cardinal Dean declared with tears in his eyes, "Francis was the most vivid reflection of Christ that many of us have ever seen in this life." And at the end of the Mass, instead of applause, there was silence. A silence deeper than any words, a silence of reverence, of farewell, of promise. "We will follow your example, Pastor." During his pontificate, Pope Francis not only led, he sowed. He sowed a church that was closer, more human, more merciful. He promoted a reform that was not only of structures, but of mentalities. He taught bishops the importance of smelling like sheep, that is, living close to the people. He encouraged priests to welcome with affection, especially those whom society often rejects. He reinforced the role of women, the value of listening, and the need to open our eyes to the existential peripheries of the world. His legacy lives on in every gesture of welcome, in every sincere confession, in every hug given to a poor person, in every parish that opens its doors to those who suffer. Francis always believed that the future of humanity passes through the family. In the synods on the family, he defended real love, the kind that is not perfect, but insists on remaining. He encouraged fathers and mothers to educate with tenderness. He encouraged young people to marry, but with courage and commitment. He welcomed wounded couples, showing that the church is not there to judge, but to heal. How many families have found new meaning in his teachings? How many fireplaces have been rekindled thanks to his words? And how many children today bear the name Francis in his honor? It was Francis who wrote the encyclical Laudato Si, calling on the entire world to care for our common home. It was not just an environmental text. It was a spiritual cry. The earth groans, the poor suffer, and the responsibility is ours. He combined science and faith, reason and spirituality to remind us that God also reveals himself in trees, rivers, and creatures, and that to harm nature is to harm the Creator. He was also tireless in the fight for peace. He never stopped calling for an end to wars, for dialogue between peoples, and for the reconciliation of hearts. Unlike many leaders, Francis listened, and he wept with those who wept. He listened to mothers who had lost children. He listened to persecuted priests. He listened to curious atheists. He listened to young people full of doubts. He listened to forgetful elderly people. And he never responded with ready-made formulas. He responded with presence. In a hearing, a young woman confessed to having tried to take her own life. Francisco said nothing. He just hugged her and cried with her. There, in that moment, the world understood. There was Jesus. Francisco always had a special sparkle in his eyes when he spoke to children. He would interrupt speeches when a child hugged him. He would sit on the floor to listen to them. He said that they taught him more than many doctors. At World Youth meetings, he called on young people to be protagonists of faith, not to stay on the couch, but to get up and change the world. He believed in young people. He believed in their dreams. And more than that, he said that the church needed them. Today, thousands of young priests, lay people, and missionaries say, "I listened to Pope Francis, and because of him, I gave my life to God." Francis never promised easy paths. He spoke of the cross with truth, but also with hope. He taught that suffering can be redemptive, that forgiveness is possible, that pain can bear fruit. He himself carried his own cross. Those of the physical pain, internal criticism, the lack of understanding from many, but he never retaliated. He responded with silence, with prayer, with tenderness. He was a pope of resistance, but not of the resistance of pride, of the resistance of firm hope in the love of God. He was a pope of resistance, but not of the resistance of pride, of the resistance of firm hope in the love of God. Those who were with Francis in his final moments say that he did not go quietly. Before his last breath, with his breath ragged and his voice soft, he whispered, "Lord, forgive us. Teach us to love." It was his last prayer, a request not for himself but for all of us, a plea for mercy, a humble plea from a man who, even on the verge of death, continued to teach how to live. One of the nurses reported that he was holding a small wooden crucifix and that moments before he had said softly, "Jesus, I trust in you," and then he was gone. The death of Pope Francis was not just headline news. It generated a wave of commotion, transformation, and awakening around the world. In Africa, a woman who survived a war camp said, "It was Pope Francis who taught me to forgive. Today, I pray for him as for a father." In Germany, a young atheist wrote, "I never believed in God, but the way he spoke made me want to believe in something greater." In India, a young Hindu woman wrote, "Francis was a saint for all. He loved us without wanting to convert us. He just wanted to remind us that we were children of God." On the outskirts of São Paulo, an ex-convict held a photo of the Pope and said in tears, "It was because of him that I returned to the church." He said that no one is irredeemable. Instead of despair, Francis's death sparked a movement of spiritual rebirth, congregations packed to capacity, people returning to confession after decades, young people setting up prayer groups in universities, charity campaigns under the name Seeds of Francis springing up in several countries. It was as if, when he left, he had left a flame in every heart, a silent mission to continue what he had started. Shortly after his death, shrines dedicated to his memory began to spring up. In Buenos Aires, his childhood home became a place of pilgrimage. In Assisi, a new chapel was built, Chapel of the Mercy of Francis. In Rome, a water fountain was installed at the entrance to the basilica with the inscription, thirst for justice and mercy. But the greatest altar erected in his honor was invisible. It was the altar of the heart of every person touched by his faith, his love, and his courage. Priests and cardinals, nuns and missionaries, lay people and children. Everyone spoke of him with a mixture of longing and gratitude. A young priest said, "When I thought about giving up my vocation, I saw Pope Francis smile at a sick person, and I understood that there was still hope in the priesthood." An African nun commented, "He gave me the courage to continue in the villages, even without resources. He made me feel that God saw every little effort." Even a child, upon seeing his photo, asked, "Mom, is he Jesus?" The mother, with tears in her eyes, replied, "He is someone who lived like Jesus." Francis is gone, but he did not die. His body rests, yes, but his message walks the streets, enters homes, lives in hearts. He taught that true holiness does not shout, it serves. That faith is not a shield against pain, but a bridge over it. That the love of Christ does not exclude, it includes, heals, embraces. He taught us to look into the eyes of others and see there God. Even before any formal process by the church, the people already called him a saint. In the chants of masses, in the graffiti on the walls, in the rosaries of children, the name Francis now sounded with heavenly reverence. He did not perform visible miracles during his lifetime, as many canonized saints have, but he performed the miracle of reunion, of return, of reconciliation. He performed the miracle of restoring to many the faith they had lost, of giving dignity to the despised, of making Christ accessible, visible, alive. As a woman said during a mass in Uganda, "Francis was the only pope who spoke to me without needing to know me." After his death, countless testimonies began to emerge. In Colombia, a paralyzed child was able to walk again after praying with his mother in front of a photo of the Pope. In Italy, a young seminarian who had been given up on by doctors, after an accident, survived and said, "It was Pope Francis who visited me in a dream and said, 'Get up and return to the mission.'" In Syria, a Christian woman was spared an attack by kneeling with a rosary and repeating the words she heard. In a video of the Pope, "Do not be afraid." These and other stories began to spread like an echo of His Holiness. The Congregation for the Causes of Saints began, with speed and emotion, the process of beatification and canonization. But the world had already judged. Francis is a saint, one of us, one of the people. 2 years after his death, in the same place where he asked for prayers before blessing the world for the first time as Pope, St. Peter's Square was once again filled. This time, for hear the phrase, "We declare Pope Francis a saint of the Catholic Church." To the sound of bells, applause and tears, the smiling portrait of Francis, with his humble and serene gaze, was revealed on a huge banner hanging on the facade of the basilica. Thousands repeated in unison, "St. Francis of Love, pray for us." Today, his name is in encyclicals, in history books, in prayers, in the dreams of young people, and in the decisions of new pastors. But above all, he is alive in the hearts of the people. Francis did not found a new doctrine. He reminded the world of the essence of the gospel. He did not need crowns. He did not need pomp. His royalty was service. His throne was the ground on which the poor walked. His crown was of thorns transformed into flowers, and that is why he will never be forgotten. If you close your eyes now, perhaps you can still hear his voice. Calm, slow, firm, saying, "God never tires of forgiving." It is we who tire of asking for forgiveness. The church must be poor and for the poor. Go out, evangelize, bring the perfume of mercy. And perhaps if your heart is silent, you will also hear him saying, "Pray for me." And yes, Francis, we will pray, but we will also continue, because you taught us that God's love is greater than all things, and that life only has meaning when it is given.